Contradiction.
This stuff's magic.
God, that's so clever.
Good afternoon and welcome to Artefact Live with me, Scott MacArthur.
And me, Paul Crick. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Not bad. Got a new haircut. Look at
I
that.
know, you're looking very sharp.
Yeah. Well, we're just talking off air about how we react to different circumstances, and things have picked up a little bit, and I find myself smiling and, and losing weight and not drinking so much and getting haircuts.
Good stuff.
Yeah, so quite good. And what about you? What have you been up to?
Good week. Usual round of training in the evenings. So aching a lot is what I've been up to.
Remind everybody what it is you do.
So I do martial arts. I do a particular one which is called Aikido, which is one of the non-violent ones.
Right.
So so I do that 4 nights a week.
I think
when
one
my
week
body
we need
allows
to
it.
have I think there's a show in the offing there, because I actually have a friend who's a teacher.
Cool.
I'd love to introduce you to him. So why don't we do it on here? And I'll just sit back and listen to you two talk, because I know nothing about it. But he's a great guy, Ian. The part that he's a Tory, so apart from that, he's everyone's got.
We'll
a
let
flaw.
it slide.
Yeah, everyone's got a flaw, and that's his particular.
Yeah. Let's not go into mine.
So last week we spoke about story selling, didn't we?
We did.
I really enjoyed it. I thought it was interesting, and I've had some good feedback on the socials, which
Nice.
I think we need to do another one. I don't think we even did the S in the scratch of the surface of it. So I don't know how you feel, mate, but I think we need to come back to the selling discussion. It's not where we're going for the next few weeks, but I think it's going to come back.
Yeah, I think it's a good theme. I think people have got an appetite for learning about it.
Yeah.
And we can learn from other people as well. So people who come in on and share their viewpoints and experiences of storytelling is always good.
So. Yeah, and you mentioned in this week's theme, we're talking about courage, because it kind of came up during the discussion last week with something that you actually were talking about, and I thought, oh, I like the sound of that. I hadn't thought of that. What is it about courage that particularly interests you? What is it? Why should we be talking about it? Why should we care about it?
I think if I answer that this week, I think we've hung. Oh no.
That's not very helpful. Okay, well, let's keep going. Paul will be back in a minute. We'll I think it looks like he's had a wee problem with the line. So let's see if I can still play on my side. So what I'll do is I'll show a little video here, and this is by someone called David White, who both of us. It's very odd how this isn't working. Let's just. Well, that was an interesting experience.
Oh, that's all right.
That don't know what happened there at all.
Counts as turbulence.
Turbulence. So I'm going to play a little video that I'm not sure you've seen yet, but it's by somebody we both love, the poet David White. And this is very short, everybody. It's only 90 seconds. But it's David talking about courage, because he's written in his book Consolations, there's a whole chapter on the word courage. And this was how he started a conversation about having a courageous conversation. So let's just listen to this, Paul, and see what we think of it. I'll put us off rather than Mug's been on it.
The theme of the weekend really is how you keep the conversation alive, the conversation of your own life, your own inheritance in this life, and how you stay in that meeting place between what you think is you and what you think is not you. and to get out of the sense that we're some kind of piece of ammunition that we're supposed to aim at the target of life, and to create a more surprising, conversational, and hospitable identity that has all kinds of surprising and radical and sometimes dangerous edges. And my measure of success this weekend is that you go out of this room a little more dangerous than when you came in tonight. Dangerous to yourself and to others, and a little more generous, in touch with a larger horizon, but with your feet on very determinedly on the ground. But my understanding, the first step in having a real conversation is simply to stop having the one you're having now. By definition, the courageous conversation is the conversation you're not having now. And also by definition, the courageous conversation is the one you don't want to have. And the courageous conversation is one which you hope isn't true, that there's another one you can have in its stead. And it's very similar in a sense to our approach to life. I do think that one of the reasons we find it so difficult to have courageous conversations is that human beings can't quite believe what they're involved with in the average life, and the depth and amount of loss that a human being must go through. Everyone in this room will say goodbye to everyone they know, or they will be said goodbye to. And life involves taking on names and taking on stories and then having to give them away, and taking on wonderful material things and making a house for them, and then moving out of the house and moving on. And so one half of life is the ability and discipline of giving away. Quite often things that you thought were yours forever, and giving away what is now out of season and what is about to come into season.
Well, as always, I always have to think about what David says. I don't know how you react to that.
I think it's true. What it sparked in me was something I heard yesterday, which is this idea of so the idea is courage is the opposite of fear.
Courage is the opposite of fear.
Is one way of framing it. It's not the only way.
Yeah.
But I think the courageous conversation is really important, and is absolutely right. In that we need a different conversation now, with all that's kicking off around us, with all the various crises that are happening at a community level, at a regional level, national and international level. There needs to be that different conversation. There's that famous meeting between Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev in Iceland, where Gorbachev turned up and said, "I'm here to deny you an enemy." Which, that if you think about the courage it would take to do that on a world stage with the world's media attention and other political entities viewing on that, just takes an inordinate amount of courage to say that. But in doing so, paved the way for what was then one of the primary treaties on nuclear arms.
It's gorgeous, isn't it? I mean, it's an absolutely beautiful
it's breathtaking.
way to.
It really is breathtaking, and it's thinking about. So where do we have that conversation where we can take the Gorbachev chair, and what is it we need to say in the room, and who do we need to say it to?
Yes.
To do that, rather than what Dr. Bob Anderson talks about, which is playing not to lose.
Yes.
I'm gonna hold my posture. I'm gonna save face,
yes.
And I'm gonna say the things that keep me safe, so that I don't have to change, and I don't lose anything. I think there's sorry, go on.
There's a lot to unpack there from what you've added to that. I mean, I think the the statement he made about be a little more dangerous and courageous, he added on to that. But I like that. I mean, that, I think, I mean, you and I were playing our own definition, weren't we? And I mean, there's a slide here that we've taken it from. I've mentioned on the show before Maria Popova, who had a website called Brain Pickings, and she's recently rebranded it the Marginalian. And this is a quote that's kind of riffing off of Susan Sontag, who I've also talked about before. Courage comes in many guises: the courage to despair, necessarily the necessary for being an artist, the courage to be vulnerable, the surest yet most difficult path to self-transcendence, courage at knife point where our humanity is revealed, and the courage to resist cynicism. God, I'm getting my tongue and my teeth all mixed up today. But the bit that we've kind of added to that is, and the courage to listen to and share your own story. And I think that's kind of what you said last week, and it really resonated with me. You know, courage. And I've been thinking about it all week. And I think the two things together, you know, about the sort of the Gorbachev story, which I hadn't heard that, believe it or not. That's the first time I've heard that. Wow. You know, what do you think that means then? What does it mean for, if you're sitting at work right now, what does having a courageous conversation mean? Where does it start?
It's a bit like a Mexican standoff.
Yes.
It's you know, when you've had a bit of an argument with your partner and you sort of disappear to other ends of the house and your head's in other stuff. Someone's got to go first in the process of saying I was wrong or I'm sorry, or preferably both. And that in itself is a small piece of courage. It's a willingness to say, what am I no longer willing to tolerate? You know, what we tolerate is the standard we accept. And I think
it's a standard we accept. I like that.
Yeah. So if you walk past, so we a stupid thing, but on the basis of that saying, you know, if we're walking around the village, walking the dogs, and we see someone's chucked something on the floor, a piece of rubbish, we'll pick it up.
Yeah.
Because we're not willing to tolerate the fact that someone's chucked some garbage onto the pavement and makes the village look crap. Not only that, you know, from a climate change point of view, it's one little thing we can do to make a difference. And it's going first, and it's, you know, I'm not prepared to accept that standard. So, yeah, the challenge to the audience that would be, what is it you're no longer willing to tolerate? And I think there's a lot of that going on with the great resignation. You know, people are saying, hang on a minute, what's going on? I suddenly realized what I was doing, and I was perhaps a little on autopilot.
Yes.
And I'm now going to make some adjustments, and I'm actually going to have a conversation in an adult to adult way that says, look, you know, can we just take a step back here? You know, I'd like to share my viewpoint. What do you think?
Well, I think that I'll build on that, because I think just yesterday I was talking to one of my clients who I'm speaking to on Thursday, and I said to her, you know, where are you with the implications of, you know, the sort of post-COVID impact on how we go to work? And she said, well, we're struggling with it. You know, there are ways we can go. There are different people with different perspectives. And I said to her, when was it ever not like that? But I think what's happening is, as you say, people are expressing themselves. So equally, yesterday I saw someone posting, you know, has anyone ever thought about how ridiculous commuting is? You know, I spend 3 hours every day on a tube to get to an office, and for working 7 hours. So I'm actually spending 10 hours a day, but only 3 of them are productive, because you can't work on the tube, can you? I mean, you can't even think on the tube, never mind, you know, get your laptop out. And we all knew that was the case, didn't we? But we weren't brave enough, you know, to actually voice it. And I think, I mean, COVID's been horrific, but it has in some way for some people, and I do think we over egg it sometimes, but for some people, they're willing to say what they actually think, and they weren't before.
Yeah, well, it's like fire isn't particularly pleasant in certain circumstances. It is, because it paves the way for new growth and regeneration.
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Absolutely. I know that we can continue to read of horrific experiences and that people have been through. So it's too easy to generalize.
Yes.
But there is a go first. There is a wake up and smell the coffee moment that we seem to have been able to become aware of.
Yes. The other thing that, I mean, there is a trying to be balanced on this, because my reaction is, well, yeah, we should be being more, hybrid working and people centric. I mean, I've been talking about this for bloody years. It's not, none of that's new. But on the other hand, there is a psychological thing. I mean, it's called the availability heuristic, where people tend to remember the context they are currently in without going back to the bigger experience. The more, there's all sorts of scientific jargon around this, but only reacting to the current dialogue is probably not as positive as it could be. I think you need to be, because do you remember that there was all that abuse? What's his name? The apprentice guy got for saying, people,
Lord Sugar.
Lord Sugar, and he got a lot of abuse, and I have to say some of that was well deserved. But I worked in employee relations for a long time, and you do develop a cynicism in that role where, I never sacked a good employee. And people forget that there are employees who don't want to be there, who will abuse the system, but then obviously the counter argument to that is, well, that's the thin end of the wedge. That's not the thin end of the wedge. That's not the majority, I hope. So, I would stand up a little bit for Sugar. I don't agree with him, but I would stand up for some of his argument. I just think it was very clumsy.
Don't you find that people don't have the conversation? There's no conversation in the interview that says, hang on, I'm auditioning you as much as you're auditioning me.
Here. Absolutely right. Absolutely.
It's usually a values conflict that causes the cracks to appear and a wedge to be driven. So
yes,
are we not in a place where employers should and people interviewing for jobs or employees should have the conversation that says, actually, this isn't for me anymore.
Yeah.
And then employers should be saying, oh, right, okay, how can we help you get to where you want to be? And then people saying, okay, how do we backfill that role? And have a different conversation that's a different dynamic, rather than the dancing around the handbags conversation of, well, are you leaving? Aren't you leaving? What's going on? Or, well, I can't tell you, all this, what Dr. Bob Anderson at Leadership Circle calls playing not to lose.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think there, though, it's a classic example of a false binary. I think people are. I mean, one of my favorite poets is Charles Bukowski, and he says at one point, isolation is a gift. Now that's true for some people. It's true for some of the time, but isolation can also kill you.
Yes, it can.
So I think there needs to be a. This is quite good, because this is a courageous conversation, because there are not enough out there. I mean, I was reading the comments on that Egypt's statement. Sorry, that's showing my bias on that very successful individual's statement, and they're all going, he's a silly old man. They're committing a mistake there, because they're assuming that because he's older that he's silly, and that's not true.
Well, it's too easy to blow someone else's candle out, isn't it? And as the quote says, it's the ability not to be cynical, and it's the ability to take a different stance that says, well, people aren't their behavior, or what is it that's causing people to do that? It's the courage to take the time, because we're all been in this hustle culture, to take the time and step back and say, I actually want to take the opportunity to think about stuff, so that I'm not shortcutting and jumping to the lowest common denominator of groupthink.
Yes. And I think that, I mean, I run an event late last week for a small group of chief executives, and one of them said at the end, the main thing today, Scott, and I thought it was quite nice and quite sophisticated feedback. He said, the main thing for me today is you've made me aware of things I had no idea about. You know, that awareness is the first step. And I was like, you know, thank you very much. Because, and I think it's almost like our role on this show to raise awareness, not in a pontification way or a smart arse way, but in a way that people listen to us or watch us and go, God, you know, I'd never heard that quote that Paul mentioned. And that actually is generative. That makes me think about, you know, how I work with my colleagues, and why don't I challenge my boss about how I feel about, you know, commuting for 2 hours each way every day in a car. Maybe there's a different way. And I mean, that to me, and I mean, I did respond to the Lord Sugar thing, and I did say, you know, I never get any abuse. I don't even get any, nobody even trolled me, mate. But I did say,
I'll look it
calm
up after.
down. Yeah.
I'll sort some out for you. Don't worry. I'll look it up.
Okay, I look forward to it, mate. But I said on the LinkedIn thing, I said, look, everybody, you're committing the same crime as him.
Yes.
You know, because you're being just as, it's a false binary. You're just being as polarized as him. And the fact is, some people are lazy bastards who won't do any work at home, and other people will grasp the opportunity and flourish.
Yes.
It's a mixture. We're too complicated for all these false binaries. It does. You probably tell me my levels of hormones are going up, because I get quite annoyed about it, because it's so bloody obvious. You know, we are complex. And it's why I get cross about a lot of the gurus, the Simon Sinek's of this world, because they tend to try and simplify us all down to these little simple equations. Well, it just isn't like that.
I agree, and I get frustrated by this. Oh, you must simplify stuff. And there are contexts where that is appropriate.
Yeah.
I'm just revisiting The West Wing again, and I am loving.
It's amazing,
the complexity of the storytelling and the character and the dialogue, and the ideas, you know, that are making me think about. Yeah, all right. There was an episode called Shibboleth, and I enjoyed the episode. But what the hell is a Shibboleth? So then you start to do a deep dive into the background to all that, and you go, "Wow, why at that time did I not know that? And why is it now that it's piqued my curiosity enough?" And I think Sir Ken Robinson nails it in his TED talk. You know, it's educated out of us, because what's dangerous about courage is you know, the willingness to think for ourselves, the willingness to study what matters to us, and then to put that to use. And you know, the last thing the social contract was negotiated for was a workforce that stood on its own 2 feet, and good God, they think for themselves. How dangerous can that be? When what we really want is compliant, good, obedient workers to be the cog in the machinery, and you know, that's all gone, thankfully, or is going.
It hasn't though, hasn't it? Because I mean, collective bargaining is still the foundation on which many of our organizations and institutions are still built, and it. I mean, there is a parallel track, isn't there? Because technology means that. I mean, I talk about this in one of my keynotes. You know, all the products outside our work are being individualized, but inside work, we're still doing collective bargaining.
Yes,
that ain't going to continue. I mean, that's not being a futurist. That's just bloody common sense.
No,
you know,
I know, and with open source, you know, you can be quite prolific on your own without sort of having to kowtow to a particular party line.
Yes, and I mean, we're probably going off track, but we can come back. But I actually can quite comfortably argue that we are now seeing the beginning of the end of the organization as we know
I saw someone else comment on that.
Yeah,
they were saying that the end of the organization is nigh, and I think in its current form, certainly the large scale organization, because scale is the enemy. So
that's right.
But to bring it back to courage and sort of going first, because there's a nice Billy Graham quote I found, which a while ago actually, which says, "Courage is contagious. When a brave man or woman takes a stand, the spines of others are often stiffened."
Nice.
And that's it. And once one goes, then people tend to get behind that person and say, "Yeah, I feel that way too," or "I feel similar. Here's my nuances around that idea, and I want to express that." And I think what that does is it restores creativity, and it restores our diversity. We become naturally diverse and inclusive through that. Which leads me to think about, well, what is it that keeps that in place and stops us from doing that? And how do we overcome that? And I don't have the answers yet. But,
I'll tell you, they might be able to help with that a little bit, because one of the, I've mentioned him to you before, my mentor, Jim Douglas. Hi, Jim, I know you watch. He always said, I remember we worked in a fish factory together. First time I met him, he was my manufacturing director in a fish factory in Fraserburgh in the north of Scotland. So it was a really dirty job, quite literally. And what he did, he came in as a firefighter because the place was falling apart. Fisher Foods was on its knees, £2 billion in debt. We were in deep trouble. And he came in and he completely transformed the place, Paul, because what he did, he just said, and this is all he did. There was more than this, but if I think back in it, there's all these lessons I got from him there. And the first thing he did was he said, right, I know nothing about fish factories. He's a Rolls Royce engineer. He said, so what we'll do in the management meetings, we used to have the, that visible factory model where you all get together in the morning and you talk about what you're going to do. He said, every morning, 7 o'clock, morning prayers, we used to call it, and I know other companies call the same thing. He says, I'm not going to say anything until the end. Right? And Jim would just stand there, and he's a big honey monster friendly character, but don't cross him, But he would just stand there. Sorry, Jim. He'd just stand there and he'd listen. And for the first few weeks, it was a bit of a rabble. It was like there was one guy who was a disruptive, and not in a good way. He was a bit of a prick. And he would say stuff, and it was like, oh, no. He don't want him not to talk, but he was leading them down a very disruptive route that was very damaging. But gradually, the group started to manage. So that's the right word. Whatever it was doing. And then it got to the point where it really began to work, and it got to the point where all Jim was saying at the end of the meetings was, great, let's do it. That was it. Jim's job was just to say, yeah, well done, guys. Because he gave them permission by saying, I know nothing about fish factories. Then he just shut up, Paul. And how brave is that?
In certain circumstances, very, very brave.
Yeah.
But it acknowledges two truths, which is, one, we're all winging it. I don't care who you are, what you do. There is a large component of what you do that's winging it, which I think is important, and also that that we have no control. Really, the control over certain things is just an illusion.
Yes,
and I think what excites me is the courage to entertain those kinds of ideas and say, okay, if I entertain that, how does that change the quality of our thinking? So, the much misquoted Einstein quote of, I think I mentioned it last week, the thinking that got us here isn't the thinking that's going to get us out of here. Yes. So, and I paraphrase very, very broadly, a misquote. So if that's the case, what is different? What does need to be different? I'm a big fan of, I've just come across Nassim Haramein. I don't know if you're a fan or not, but and he had me when he said, we all imagine that space is empty.
Excellent.
And he said, what if it's full?
Yeah.
And I just went, oh, mind blown.
Yeah.
Boom. And you start, and it's just this willingness to go left when everyone else will go right, even if you're wrong.
Yes. I think the other thing, that's lovely. The other thing that I get stuck on, if I'm honest, I see a lot of people wanting to go left or right, depending on where you start, or down the middle even, the third way, if you like. But they then pick up another badge. Like, I hear people talking about, oh, it's all the patriarchy, or it's all this, or it's the Illuminati, or it's the city, or it's the politician, and they always seem to be giving it a label, blaming something for the problem. And yet I've never met anybody. Well, no, that's not true. I've only ever met one person who was like that, who was so power driven. I mean, he was an absolute twit of a man. I mean, in fact, he wasn't. He was a very clever man, but he had a superiority complex. So he just believed everyone else was an idiot. He used to tell me, I'm smarter than the average bear, so I'm going to tell everybody what to do. Well, you can guess what happened to him, can't you? Never ends well for those guys. But I worry about people jumping to these conclusions. It's the patriarchy, it's the matriarchy, whatever hierarchy it is, rather than, because I think, and it might have been missed on that slide that we pulled together from Margin Alien, the courage to listen to and share your own story. I don't know if people are often brave enough. Maybe I'm trying to answer my own insecurities here. Their own story, they're not answering their own questions. I'm not saying you should end at your own questions, but just you, because your own opinion is very often, if not always, flawed. But I think you need to start somewhere, and often starting with your own beliefs, or your own resistance, or your own lack of courage, or your own over bravery, because you can be over brave and say too much. I've done that. So it's a slightly rambling statement, but hopefully you get what I'm getting at.
Yeah, the assumption is that the problem's out there.
Yeah.
And yet we're mea culpa, we are complicit.
Yeah.
The longer the problem continues, we are part of the problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the extent to which we can, take the parliamentary process in the UK.
Yes.
Everyone will, whatever their political colour, will moan about the state of politics, and
yes,
they don't achieve stuff, and this, that, and the other, which isn't true. But you have to look systemically and say, how does the system work?
Yeah.
To what Desmond Tutu talks about, at some point, if people keep falling in the river, you have to go upstream to figure out who's pushing them in, or what's pushing them in. And you have to look systemically and say, well, you have to look at how laws are made, how voting works, and you have to fix that first.
Yes.
Before, irrespective of which colour has the majority, or whether there's a coalition.
Yes, absolutely.
And that then means, so are you going to get off your backside and go and stand somewhere and talk about this, and find the others who talk about this, and create a groundswell of support if it's important enough to change? That's one side of it. The other side is, there's this myth that we as people fear change. Oh, we don't like change. We don't like change. We're very, very scared of change. Yeah. Actually, that's not true.
Not at all.
We are. Kids. Well, yeah. But we're wired for curiosity. We're wired to learn and explore, and that's what we do. So if that's the case, what is it we're afraid of? And someone dropped a penny in the slot for me the other night, and they said, what we're afraid of is loss.
Yeah.
What are we going to, what's the consequences? If you did a cost benefit analysis, it was like all these benefits, but what's the cost? And the cost comes down to how does our identity change?
Yes.
If we're willing to do that. And very often in a workplace situation, or even in a relationship situation where we're relating with one or more people, we have an identity in that. We have a network of relationships, and we have habits of behavior that we're very comfortable with. And anything that threatens our identity, I mean, look at any elite athlete that's gone from being an elite athlete to retiring. A lot of them go through that process of,
tough. Holy
crap, I didn't think about how my identity was going to change. And I want that back, but I can't have it back because Anno Domini is against me.
Yeah.
The system works in a certain way. So there's a lot there. I kind of rumbled a bit, but
no, it's all right. I tell you, I had I don't do it very often these days, but on and off over the years, I've done some executive coaching. And one of the things, I'm not really a coach. I'm more a mentor coach. I think I'm not traditionally a coach, I guess. But the first thing I ask them, and it's only first because I put it first. It's not there. I don't think it's there for any intellectual reason, but I ask them about their relationship with money, and the eyes go up, they go left and right, they go, "What's he talking about? Oh fuck! No one's ever asked me about that before." And often we end up honestly having 6 or 7 sessions just about the relationship with money, because, and I know it's not the only one, but it's one of these drivers. It's one of these things in our lives. One of my mentees said to me very recently. They said to me that money was more important to them than their family. Right now, that's very intimate, and of course, I'm not going to say who said it because it was very intimate, and I had permission to ask the question and permission to share the experience, but certainly not naming any names. But I thought, right, now that was really brave. Now that I really admired that person for saying that. But of course, that's led to a whole range of other conversations, and I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know where they're going to lead me. I don't know where, my mentee is going to take that, but bloody hell, it's strong and powerful and really brave. These are the big questions. You don't get asked that question on an MBA.
No. We don't teach power and politics.
No.
On leadership courses either.
No.
And yet it's there.
Or storytelling, incidentally.
Well, I think that's becoming more common. But yeah, I think there are certain things that's really interesting. Of course, my follow-up question is, okay, so what is it that money gives you?
Yeah, of course. And that's where the conversation is.
So that'll prove to be interesting. Yes.
And I shall report back if I can. But it's. I always like that sort of answer though, because you get. I don't know what you feel about this, but I talked about it this week as well when I was working. I talked about my Johnny Cash experience, where I was working at Peterhead Prison for whatever reason, and I did a values workshop with the prisoners. Have I told you this story?
No, tell me more.
It was hilarious. So I ended up in front of 300 murderers and rapists, because Peterhead Prison is where all the really bad guys go in Scotland, and a lot of English bad guys go there as well. It's a really, really tough prison. And I walked in and I was absolutely bricking it. I think I was 28 at the time, so I wasn't even that experienced. And I walked in and I'm on a stage in front of these, people all set up at 8 a table, and I went through this values conversation with them. And bloody hell, guess what they come up with?
Go on. I had no idea.
Yeah, you do. Teamwork, honesty, communications.
Really?
Right? Yeah. And I'm like, bugger me, what's going on here? And I became very, very cynical about values at that point, because I thought, wait a minute, if these serial killers and rapists have the same values as my company or as all my friends, what's going on here? And it set me off. I was very unsure, and I still am. I'm not cynical anymore, but it made me really think. And they've no reason to lie. They're not going to sit there and lie, are they? Well, you wouldn't expect them to in a group.
There's a great documentary. I wonder if you've seen it. It's called The Work. Have you seen The Work?
I have seen The Work. Yeah, I have seen The Work.
Where they go into Folsom Prison.
Unbelievable.
It's the most electric piece of television I've ever witnessed.
Do you know how you watch The West Wing again? I'm going to watch The Work again, because it's that long since I've seen it.
Yeah, it is available. It's still available on YouTube. And it's in my mind, it's the most electric thing. And what it shows is that we're all the same underneath.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of the point I was making, but less.
Yeah. I did a thing back in 2007 called the Mankind Project, which is a global organization. They do a thing called the New Warrior Adventure. And
Oh yes, I've heard of it.
some people are cynical about it, some people aren't. And having been through that experience, I can promise you that all underneath, once you strip all the masks and stuff away, it's just absolutely beautiful to watch.
Brilliant.
And that's, we wear this defense, and we think it's like armor, and that's what's brave. We've put our armor on and we walk through the front door of the office or the office building, and now we're ready to defend. And yet, when you take all that off and you stand in the truth of, stand in the fire, as Oriah Mountain Dreamer would say, then there's nothing. There's nowhere else to go. You are as strong as you'll ever be.
Yes.
And it's to the point of being invincible.
That's interesting. Right. I think we're going to have to dwell on that.
Okay. Let's dwell away.
No, one of the other things I've learned is to stop bullshitting when I don't know where I'm going. Some people don't think I'm very successful at it. But the work is certainly going. I had forgotten about that, and I think I'll go back and revisit that and do some work on it, because this is a rich theme, this courage piece. It's a bit like storytelling generally. And Andy's just reminding us that Peterhead Prison is now a family fun destination. Excellent.
I shall put that on my list of places to visit. Yeah.
Well, you can go and see where the murderers and rapists used to be, and where Scott's stories used to take place. But anyway, so that, I hope folks have enjoyed that. God, we've done 45 minutes in 45 minutes, but it went so quickly, Paul. We're going to take it in a different direction next week, aren't we? Well, it's linked, isn't it? But tell people where we're going next week. Who we got on next week? So
next week is a really good friend of mine, a lady by the name of Jennifer Hamady. You can find her at findingyourvoice.com. Jennifer is a licensed therapist in the US, but don't let that put you off. Because she also she started her career in music performance, and if you think that sounds dull, then read her roster of who she's been supporting. I won't spoil the surprise for everyone, but you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Amazing.
But she takes what's called a trauma-informed approach to helping people find their voice, so that they can express themselves either through singing or through public speaking, or literally storytelling. And that perspective is an unusual perspective, and way of teaching and thinking about storytelling, and what prevents that. And she's just, I've known her now for 10 years, and I phoned her up out of the blue. I was hosting a podcast for the Modern Vocalist, and just because I can't remember why I said yes, but I did. And I got a list of people to contact, and I thought, right, I'll get in touch. And she just said yes. I was like, oh, wow. And she says she believes in having the courage to step out, suck the juice out of life. And, when we talk about enjoy, the focus is on the joy. So I think she's going to be a wonderful guest to listen to. She's a published author. She's just working on her 4th book, I think. Right. She's a vocal coach. So she's behind some of the voices on America's Got Talent, some of the major artists in the world of country. So she's just a phenomenal all-round human being, and I'm very proud that I'm able to call her one of my friends. Fantastic. And that she said yes.
Yeah, she might not have been as much of a friend as you'd thought.
Yes, bugger.
That's terrific. But and maybe we'll get some crossover from our other work with the music in the music world.
But she'll talk about particularly nerves, when you're performing on stage, and if you're a public speaker or you're a storyteller giving pitches and that sort of thing, then I think you'll find it useful to come and listen to some of her stories and a ton of wisdom. Fantastic. Well, thanks for organising that. I do appreciate it.
You're
welcome.
So I hope people enjoyed that. I loved that. I mean, I think the Susan Sontag thing about courage and fear, the relationship thereof, and the complexity of just being a human being. I think maybe complexity is a subject we could come back to, actually, Paul. I think we have to think about that. Because I mean, I think my basic axiom is, if someone tells a story based on complexity, it's a good story. If they tell it based on nothing, it's not such a good story. You know, I mean, that's a very simple way of simplifying it.
I'd love to see if we can get hold of Nora Bateson to come and talk about that. See if she'd come and be a guest, because she's
a jolly good idea.
She's great. And her and David Snowden.
David's amazing.
To probably the finest minds we've got right now.
I mean, he's getting a bit more contentious in his old age as well.
He is. He's a bit grumpy at times, but that's okay.
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine. That's us in 35 years, mate.
Yeah.
So my name is Scott MacArthur, and thank you very much for tuning in to Artifact Live.
And I'm Paul Crick. Thanks for listening.
We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.